Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good, presented by Betches Media. So consider this episode an audio friendship bracelet. Our guest today has no idea who I am, but he has made a huge impact on me. I am a religious reader and fan of this man's, writing from his work with Rolling Stone to all of his books, Dreaming the Beatles, On Bowie, Talking to Girls About Duran, and a book that left me with an emotional bruise, Love is a Mixtape. I recommend all these books, but now this man has done it again. His new book, Heartbreak is the National Anthem, How Taylor Swift Reinvented Pop Music, is a definitive book going through Taylor's catalog, her mystery, her myth, and everything in between. Like he says, she is a jigsaw puzzle that turns into a mirror. I read this book with a smile on my face the entire time, and I know you will too. I think of Taylor Swift as the fabric of pop culture and the fabric of our feelings, and Rob Sheffield I think of in the same way. Rob, welcome to the show.
Sorry, man.
That's great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Absolutely delighted to talk to you. Appreciate your kind words.
I very much mean it. And we're talking about a shared love. I got into Taylor, I think, shockingly late in life, right before Folklore, during the pandemic. And I have just devoured everything about her since, including going to Sweden for 2 nights of the Eras tour this past May.
No way.
And I just wanted, it was so amazing. And I know you've seen the Eras tour. You did like a 3-night stand in Jersey, right?
Yeah. I'm still recovering from that. I love that you went to Stockholm. That is perfect.
Well, it was easier to get tickets there. And the thing is, we got tickets for the first night and I loved it so much that I said, would you mind if we just went back to the second night? And we got him on StubHub. And I got to tell you, this show, like, it reminded me of like seeing Prince at his best, or Beyonce that I've gotten to see live. And it was overpowering. And I'm so thrilled that I got to see it both nights in a row to digest, because it's 3 hours of insanity. I mean, I was just wondering, reading this, I mean, I know from the book, but what initially got you into Taylor Swift?
Well, the first time I heard Taylor Swift, I had no idea who she was. I was just making lunch in my kitchen, and I just had music on in the background. I wasn't even paying attention to it. I was more concerned about my grilled cheese sandwich and making sure that it wasn't overly toasted. It was on the George Foreman grill. You remember those? Yeah. I've still got mine. Oh my God, the stories that thing could tell. And my main concern was making sure I didn't overdo the grilled cheese. It sucks. You have to start over again if you burn it. So I was paying attention to that. And this song is on in the next room, and it completely grabs me by the forehead and slams me into the wall. It's called Our Song. And it wasn't her first single, but it was the first one I heard. It was, I think, the second or third single from her debut album. It's got the great chorus. Our Song is a slamming screen door, which I just thought, what a hook. That is brilliant. And I just loved the sort of cocky arrogance in the song. She's singing, she's a teenage girl, and she's singing, I've heard all these songs. She's like, I'm such a music expert. I love how she sings. I've heard every album, listened to the radio. I know every song there is to know. I just love that swagger in her voice. And how she says, I've heard every song ever done, but I've never heard a song that does justice to how I feel, that lives up to my hopes and dreams and feelings. So I'm just going to have to write it myself. And the song ends with her saying, so I just grabbed a pen and napkin and I wrote down our song. And I just thought, what a brilliant song. The way it's put together, the way this girl ends the song by becoming a songwriter. And I instantly Googled to see who wrote this. Even before I wanted to know who sang it, I wanted to know who wrote it. And I thought, well, isn't that strange? The songwriter is also the singer. That just didn't happen at the time in country music. It was unthinkable. And even weirder, this was her first album and she was a teenager. And I thought, what? Like, they let some teenager talk herself into a label releasing an album with her writing all the songs? That just doesn't happen. And I remember thinking, like, gosh, I sure hope she has some other good songs in her. We've all had these flashes in the pan that come, they go, I'm someone who bought the second Criss Cross album. I always think these people are going to have a bunch more hits in them.
Yeah.
Usually they don't. But honestly, I just wanted there to be maybe another song in her songbook as good as our song. And as it turned out, at this point, that's barely one of her 50 best songs. But
well, I mean, yeah, you did an article a while back, like, at that time, I think she had like 160 songs, and now she has over 300 songs, and it seems like they're multiplying faster and faster. And I think the quality of the work is still there. And you point out early in the book, which I just so geeked out on, you said nothing like Taylor Swift has ever happened before. The Beatles' whole run as recording artists lasted 8 years. And at that point in her career, I mean, she was just taking off with the album 1989. Like, and like, think about how much she's done since 1989. There is no, I mean, you give a language into speaking about her, but at this point, I feel like we're in some ways, we're in uncharted territory in pop culture and music with Taylor Swift.
Absolutely. There's no precedent for a run like this where somebody starts out at the top. I mean, that first album was such a massive hit. It's weird that if she'd retired after that first album, we'd still remember her. She'd still be massively influential. We'd still say her name. But it doesn't even make the Eras tour, because she's just topped it so many times. The debut album doesn't even make it. It doesn't even count as an era. And something I love is how nothing like this has happened where she has, after a hit like that for her debut, she's just kept rising, kept topping it with each subsequent album. And that she's 18 years into it now, and she's at her peak of cultural clout, commercial clout, definitely artistic productivity, and certainly artistic quality. She's just like, is constantly experimenting, trying new things, getting better at what she does. And there's no precedent for an artist who's at this point, at the 18-year point in her career. And we can pick some of my favorite artists and go 18 years into their career. And
you guys, by the way, this is what I love about the book too, because it's like a walk down memory lane in terms of other artists. I love that you consider Folklore like her kind of Nebraska, her Nebraska album by Springsteen. And you also point out other artists at the time and their Nebraska albums like U2's Achtung Baby and things like that. And it just, I was like, just remembering. And then also knowing that Taylor is so hyper aware of music and pop culture. And that's the thing, is how does this person exist? And I do want to point out to the fans that think, is this just some complete love letter? In a sense, sure. But you also point out she's the messiest, most fascinating figure in pop music, a red carpet celebrity whom supposedly everybody knows, the most public of artists, yet also the most deeply weird. And I loved that as well, because I think that is so true. And that is what we also love about her, because it creates the legend of Taylor, is that she can be messy at times on top of just brilliant.
Yes. And that's why she's absolutely the most divisive figure in pop culture, the most polarizing. Something I love about Taylor is she is the top argument starter in pop culture. Like, you can start an argument about Taylor Swift anytime, any place. You can always start an argument in a bar. You can always start an argument in an airport. You can start an argument in line at the DMV. Everybody has strong feelings about her, and something about her really pushes people's buttons in positive ways and also negative ways. Like, some people are just, they see red when they hear her name, and not in a good, not the album kind of way. I mean, seeing red in a, waving the red flag in front of the bull sort of way. It's a thing where she is so extremely herself that she drives a lot of people crazy and always will, and has absolutely no ability to turn it down a notch. She has absolutely no ability to not be Taylor Swift for even 1 second.
And I love, I don't know if it's concern or worry, but even throughout the book, you would listen to a new album and you would say, listen, I was kind of hoping she was going to make the last album again. and also you were one of the naysayers when Taylor decided to do Taylor's versions. And then almost immediately upon listening to the first one, you're like, of course, how could she not do this? And I love that you're that type of fan and also critic that loves her so much that we expect these things out of artists. And when they swerve left instead of going right, we're scared for them. It's watching like a tightrope act. And so far, she's been able to walk that tightrope. It's so exciting.
It's incredible. Yes. I love to be proven wrong. That's something I love as a fan. I love when the greats make an idiot out of me. That's part of what rock stars are there for, right? So, I was a teenage Bob Dylan fan. I think that trained me in being obsessed with a rock star who is determined to abuse my feelings, was going to constantly never give me what I wanted, was always going to bait and switch. Bob Dylan just kind of taught me that way of being a fan. And
Yeah.
I thought that was the most exhausting and maddening fan experience I would ever have. I wasn't even close. Taylor Swift was like, Bob, hold my beer. I got this. And it is absolutely maddening to be a fan of hers. Every time, and as a journalist who's been covering her entire career, I'm always in the position of trying to guess her next move. And I am wrong 100% of the time. I should know by now not to even try guessing her next move, but I guess I never learn.
No, I mean, you never learn, but it's also just brilliant because you like to be wrong. And I think she likes to prove us wrong. And I think there's something so beautiful about that fan experience, especially with her. To the uninitiated, will you explain quill pen, fountain pen, and glitter gel pen?
Yes, I love that image. So Taylor once broke down her songwriting, sorted her songs into 3 categories. There's fountain pen songs, quill pens, and glitter gel pens. And those are the mood of the song, depending on the mood that the song invokes and the writing implement that she associates with it. So fountain pen songs, that's most of her songs. They're conversational. They observe a scene. They create characters. There's dialogue. There's imagery. That's most of her songs. Quill pen songs, those are literary. She says those are the ones that make you feel like you're reading a 19th century sonnet by candlelight. Let me do that one over. Like quill pens, those are the ones that are more literary in an old-fashioned way. The ones that make you feel like you're an 18th century poet writing a sonnet by candlelight. The ones that tend to quote Emily Dickinson or just go into these really morbid gothic sort of fantasies that she's really into. Folklore and Evermore, those are real quill pen albums. Whereas something like Red or 1989, those are fountain pen albums. And then you've got the glitter gel cap Taylor, which is just the party girl crying in the bathroom. So New Romantics, that's a glitter gel cap song. Cruel Summer, that's a glitter gel cap song. 22, that is the ultimate Taylor glitter gel pen song. For Taylor, like these songs, these are different sorts of voices that she uses when she writes. And sometimes a song will be half and half. Sometimes a song, like White Horse is a fountain pen song, but there's a lot of quill pen in it. She was 19 when she did it. It was still a very, very straight up country love song, but there's a lot of literary overwroughtness in it that became one of her trademarks. And that she has got these different voices. It sets up the kind of songwriter she is, which is there's different Taylors in there. There's different Taylors with different voices. And sometimes they're not on the same page. Sometimes they're competitive and they're needy. Sometimes they're drowning each other out. Something I love about an album like Lover, which is the album where she's trying to do all her best tricks in one album. And that album has quill pen songs. It like, for instance, Daylight is very much a quill pen kind of song. It's got the glitter gel pen songs like Cruel Summer or I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh well. It's got lots of fountain pen songs like Soon You'll Get Better, sort of matter of fact narrative songs. But all these different voices on the Lover album are really kind of battling it out. They all want attention at the same time. And I love that turbulence of voices she creates.
You actually have a chapter on New Romantics and actually made me re-listen and reappreciate that song for what it is. And I was thinking of like, what is the genre of New Romantics to you?
To me, that is a glitter gel pen song that nonetheless has a certain quill pen aspect of it. You think of it as very connected to Mirrorball, which is a very similar kind of song that's very quill pen, but also with a weird sort of undercurrent of glitter gel pen. So to set the scene, if for anyone who doesn't know the songs, New Romantics is a song about being young and jaded and going out and clubbing and dancing and being really detached and cynical and jaded. The opening line of the song is "We're so bored," which I love, just because that is one emotion Taylor is absolutely terrible at faking. She can never come off as sincerely bored. That just isn't in the cards for her. She's too overexcitable emotionally to ever pass for bored. But it's a song about crying tears of mascara in the bathroom and wearing a scarlet letter and building a castle out of all the bricks that people throw at you. It's about making a scene. It's really her Pink Pony Club sort of song. Whereas Mirrorball is a very similar scenario. It's a dance floor. There's a mirror ball. There's people trying to have a good time. And yet the mirror ball feels like they're just faking it. And anybody can see by looking at her, she's a fraud. She's a mess. She has no business being on this dance floor. She's just a miserable person trying to pretend that she's happy in order to maybe make some friends and maybe fool some people and hopefully maybe even fool herself. But for Taylor, these are matched songs with matched characters. New Romantics, that's one of my favorite songs. Of course, she left it off the album because that's a very typical Taylor self-sabotaging thing to do. And that's the song that gave me the book title. Heartbreak is the national anthem. I just love that. It's a great hook. It's a great sing it along on the dance floor or in the karaoke bar kind of hook. God, I karaoke that song more than any other Taylor Swift song.
If you read Mr. Sheffield's work, he is very big in karaoke, and I hope to karaoke with him one day. What a dream that would be. But like New Romantics also is such a, I love your writing because you bring in personal aspects of you and your life. And with New Romantics, you almost like, wow, this is like, this is a combination, like almost self-parody of everything I like, because Duran is the, they're the most new romantic band out there. And what if this was like this kind of synth song? And I love that that's what Taylor does, though. She speaks this language where she hits all of these buttons, whether it be Joni Mitchell or Dylan or Duran. I mean, she was going into like Yaz and things like that. I mean, it just blew me away. And I think that's one of those things that I appreciate about you is you bring a language and a knowledge from the past almost, where I'm like, God, I got to go back and listen to Duran again.
Well, and I love that. That's something about her is I love that she is always the ultimate music geek, right? She is always, I love listening for different connections between musical worlds, and no artist, except maybe Prince in all of history, has made such a game out of that as Taylor. So that's something I love that she does is she's always making these connections, and she is such a geek, and she pays attention to these details. So New Romantics, that's, like the 80s new wave pop move. I happened to see Duran on Halloween this year. A fantastic show. That was just a couple nights ago. It was absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, he was wearing the big thing over his head.
The chandelier on his head. Yeah. Yes. That was mind-blowing. To do an Arcadia deep cut, like from the side project album they did in 85, the Arcadia, So Red the Rose. Not even the hit from Arcadia, a deep cut from that album. But when he sang Planet Earth and Simon Le Bon sang the line, like some new romantic looking for the TV sign. And I remember hearing him sing that line. I got, thank God, every time I hear him sing, I've been hearing him sing that line since I was a teenager in the 80s. But every time I hear him sing it now, I think of that song, New Romantics, that Taylor Swift did, and how after that song came out, I was interviewing Duran and had a very, very interesting discussion with them, explaining this song to them. They'd heard of it, but they were scared to listen to it because they thought she might be making fun of them. And I was like, nope, it's not that kind of song. She is coming on as a real deal new romantic. It's the weirdest damn thing. And that's the way Duran made music. They were always geeks. They always said they wanted to combine Chic with the Sex Pistols. They were always a band that set out to combine different musical worlds. So I love that. Of course, they're a band that Taylor Swift would be launching. I love that story.
But also, how mind-blowing is it, like you introducing Duran to something or explaining something to Duran to me is like, that just feels like rarefied air or like a fever dream of some sort. I was thinking about, in the book, you talk about going to the 2018 Reputation tour in Glendale, Arizona, and Taylor was backstage and she said she had a surprise for you and that she added All Too Well to the set because of you. And she knew it was #1 on your list. And she, you had her convinced that it was more than just a Red tour song. And to me, when I started getting into Taylor, All Too Well, that hit me right in the feels. And then the 10-minute version just smashed it again to pieces. And I'm all about big feelings, and All Too Well is it. Is that a true story? She literally said, I've added this into the set list for you.
Yes, she did. And silly me, I kind of maybe got my hopes up that she meant for the entire tour. And of course, I mentioned that the detail that she did All Too Well. I mentioned that it was in the set list when I wrote about the tour. So of course, lots of people thought, oh, opening night of the tour, she did All Too Well. That's going to be in the set list this time. We should have known better than to trust her. Oh my gosh. That was the only time of the tour she did it. And it was a song that she was not ready to start performing again. It became clear later when she did the 10-minute version, explained some of her personal history with the song. It became clear that, the song was too painful for her, so she didn't do it live. She went years at a time without doing this song live, which is completely insane. How would you write a song this great and then
I
drop it
know.
from your set list?
And now with the Eras tour, it's such a pinnacle moment of the tour. The 10-minute version is such an amazing part of the Eras tour that it just shocks me that there was a time that she couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. But that kind of makes you love her as well. But I mean, I was blown away seeing her do that live. And then I was just
Yeah.
re-listening to it this morning, preparing to talk to you. And I just thought, how that line about being, like 21 years old or, drinking coffee like you were on a late night talk show or
Yeah.
talking with your dad, that kind of specificity on top of musicality. I just want people to appreciate, even if you don't like Taylor Swift and you don't even know why you don't like Taylor Swift, give it a listen, man. Give it a listen. Read this book. It's going to make you reappreciate, re-examine, and that's what good music can do. What at this point is I think we already know the answer. What is, you talk about in the book, what is your number one song in Taylor Swift's catalog, and what is your last song in Taylor Swift's catalog in terms of ranking at this moment?
My favorites are always shifting. However, All Too Well is always clearly at the top. And something I love about the song is the strange journey the song has been on. Because for years, remember, it was a deep cut on Red. It was never a hit. It wasn't even a single. It was the song that if you knew that song, if you talked about that song, that meant that you were a hardcore fan. It was almost like a secret password among fans to separate the Swifty come latelys from the real hopeless cases. And that song played that role for years, especially since she just stopped doing it live. But people wouldn't stop asking her about it, telling her how much that song meant to them, and asking her about something that she said in the early days, that she originally wrote a 10-minute version and then edited it down for a song she could put on the album. And people just wouldn't stop asking, when are we going to get to hear that 10-minute version? Every time I wrote about the song, and I wrote about it a lot in Rolling Stone, and I'd always throw in a line, so when do we get to hear that 10-minute director's cut? She must have wished so many times that she just never mentioned the damn thing. However, people talked her into going back and reopening the story that she thought was a closed case. And she opens it up, expands the song, brings the lost verses back, writes some new ones. Now she's an adult looking back at her 22-year-old self, who was looking back at her 20-year-old self in the original. And that sense of this song is a lifelong story that she just has kept retelling along with us as we've listened to that song over the past 12 years. That makes it a very special thing, where it's just a very special journey for a song like that to take, where it just evolves over the years and we evolve along with it.
And that's why it does honestly feel like a conversation between Taylor and fans at times, where the fans really pushed for that song and made her re-examine that song. And I like that she is open to that conversation, even though on like Tortured Poets Department, she kind of, what's the song about? Well, I mean, there's a couple songs about Matty Healy but Daddy, I love him. But Daddy, I love him, of like, you should see your faces, and kind of like, taking a stand like she always does for herself and her emotions. And I find that conversation, that back and forth, very interesting, because it is at like a fever pitch now. Every cycle you think it's at a fever pitch, and then it gets bigger and bigger and more legendary. And I just wonder, like, I mean, always the question with Taylor is, where do we go from here? And I was wondering if your book, did you have like most of this written and then she drops Tortured Poets Department? Like, what was the time frame there? Because she like released an anthology album, like 2 albums back to back.
It's crazy how much the story changed while I was writing the album. I started writing it less than 2 years ago, but that was a very, very different world. So, I write this album. Her new album is Midnights. She hasn't toured in a few years. I hope maybe she'll tour again. She's still with Joe Alwyn when I write this song. She's been coupled up with him for 6 years. As far as anybody can see in the outside world, this is the one. She's settling down. And it seemed like it was a plateau for her. And we should have known. With her, there's no such thing as a plateau. She's never going to settle into a reliable, easy groove. So while I'm writing this book, she happens to win the Grammy for Best Album of the Year for Midnights, and happens to win a very historic Grammy. In fact, she wins Best Album of the Year for the 4th time. Nobody's ever won that award 4th time. She's breaking a record held by
it was like Sinatra, right? Yeah,
Sinatra, Stevie Wonder, and Paul Simon. Yes, pretty amazing company to be in. And she's 34 damn years old, and she breaks that record. That's her 4th #1. I mean, it's her 4th Album of the Year Grammy. And while she's announcing it, that's not enough. She can't just, enjoy this historic occasion. She can't just say, like, this is for all the fans or something like that. She can't just do it the easy way, the sensible way. She has to say, oh, by the way, I have a new album coming out in a couple months. Unbelievable. Who else would do that? I hope nobody else would do that. I hope nobody else does. It's a very, honestly, mind-blowingly wrong thing to do, right? Like this is a moment where it's obvious what the script is. You just say, thanks everybody, thanks for believing. You make the announcement some other time, but she's announcing this on the podium because she's Taylor Swift and she can't resist mischief. She just loves to make havoc. So this havoc is definitely made. As it turns out, she was lying about even that, because it's not an album, it's 2 albums. And she releases one at midnight, and then 2 in the morning,
a couple hours later.
Yes, she releases another album just as long, which is even better. And it's absolute madness. She makes it impossible to keep your sanity as a Taylor Swift fan, and obviously she likes it that way.
I mean, I'm like, where I remember watching the Grammys. I was in Columbus, Ohio with my dad. And I remember watching the Grammys going like, what are you doing? I was like, take the foot off the gas, Taylor. And I really, like you, I was like, what is going? And then you hear it and you're, because I now look at every opportunity is that opportunity to fail. Like, like we've created this legend and then it comes out and you're like, whoo, oh my God, we did it. And then, like you said, the second album made even more of an impact. And then you guys, she switched up the Eras tour to include Female Rage the Musical with songs from this. So not only is these albums, it's completely choreographed, costumed, all of that. Like that's all a section now in the Eras tour. And for me, I just want to get back into bed after I do this interview. I'm like, she's out there writing albums and I just like what life force drives this person. And you talk about it in your book about her as a young kid, her getting like her first guitar and, her first 6-string and going to a lesson and wanting to ask about 12-string guitars. And the teacher's like, you know what, your fingers, you're a girl with these fingers. You can't do a 12-string guitar. And she then decides to do a 12-string guitar just to prove this dude wrong. And she's able to do it. And her whole life has been that.
Her whole life has been that. She will always do something impossible, improbable, something that any sane, rational person would talk her out of just to prove it can be done by her. She had a really funny line at the Tribeca Film Festival when she was showing the All Too Well film for the first time.
Which she directed, you guys. She directed that.
Oh, yeah. She directed her film. This is a Q&A with Mike Mills, the director who did
Mike Mills, of all people, which you talk about in the book, one of the best filmmakers of all time and a very specific type of filmmaker.
Yes. 20th Century Women is one of my favorite albums of this century. One of my favorite films of this century.
Yeah.
That's just a perfect movie. I absolutely love that. With Taylor, she's talking about the Taylor's Version project, which honestly, it seemed like a crazy idea. You're going to re-record your life's work in your spare time while you're also being Taylor Swift and making Taylor Swift albums and touring as Taylor Swift. You're going to just pop into the studio now and then and remake every song you've ever done, just emotionally to prove a point, not even for business reasons, but just because it's something you want personally. And what Taylor said at the Tribeca Film Festival was, people sometimes underestimate how much I will inconvenience myself in order to prove a point. And I just love that. That's a perfect summary of the Taylor worldview. She will inconvenience us and meanwhile inconvenience the rest of the world, including those of us who actually listen to her music, she will inconvenience everybody to prove this point. And the point is
the pettiness.
The pettiness. And we love the pettiness. That's something that makes it. She shares that pettiness. It's a very specific kind of pettiness. And if you've been a music fan for a while, you recognize it as Paul McCartney pettiness. Paul McCartney, very much like Taylor, he's the soul of warmth and generosity and kindness, but he has a petty streak a mile wide. And once he gets something in his craw, he cannot let it go. He is still, after all these years, fighting to get the songwriting changed from Lennon-McCartney to McCartney-Lennon. It's like, Paul, this is an absolute no-win. Absolutely nobody. He thinks people don't realize enough that he wrote Hey Jude, that he wrote Blackbird, that he wrote Martha, My Dear.
Oh, you guys, he has this great line in the book where he says, Paul McCartney wrote Let It Be, and he's the one person that can never let it be.
It's true. Just like she's the one who can never shake it off. He's the one who can never let it be. And the fact that they are, besties makes all the sense in the world, because they have so many personality quirks in common. They're so geeky about numbers. They did this great thing for Rolling Stone. They did a Musicians on Musicians interview where they interviewed each other for our cover story. And the first few minutes of the interview, they're all just talking about numbers, and Taylor and Paul are just coming. He's like, so you're really into the number 13. And she's like, well, you're one to talk. You release McCartney 1, McCartney 2, McCartney 3, all in years ending in 0, and she's a geek for numerology just as he is. And it's like, oh my God, you two are hopeless. But they both have
that streak,
that petty streak, and that Paul is still trying to settle scores with people who died years ago. That's, he's still trying to win arguments that he had, like years and years ago. He's got a great moment in his live show where he does the Beatles' first, when they were still the Quarrymen and they made their home record at the local studio in spite of all the danger. And every time he does that song, he makes a speech that one of the guys who didn't turn out to be one of the Beatles, but he hoarded that record and kept it for the next 50 years when he was supposed to return it to the rest of the group. And it's like, wow, there's absolutely no reason to make that speech every night when you do that song. But that's a very Paul thing to do. And
you do touch on these things. And of course, I mean, this weekend we had a post from Scott Borchetta of, her label or her old Big Machine. Did you see that? The Instagram post?
Yeah.
Well, did you have any thoughts? I mean, because it was like, listen, I'm so proud of the work we did and all of that. And I'm just like, wow, had a picture of young Taylor on there. And of course, I think all of us Taylor fans at this point know, Big Machine sold her masters, and obviously Scooter Braun was involved in that, and a holding company. And that's also another thing that led her to those Taylor's versions. But I was kind of shocked to see that Instagram post. I was like, are we poking the bear? Are we poking the Swifties? And it's one of those things. I'm like, is Taylor going to accept the Instagram post or put out some sort of mystery post about the post?
I wouldn't put either of those things past her. It was very strange. It was very out of nowhere, right? Like nobody's really asking him for comment at this very late phase in the Eras tour. Nobody's really like going to him for permission. It's too late for him to give his stamp of approval. It's way too late for him to take the high road. It's like, oh, I'm proud of everything we achieved together. It's like, woo, that ship sailed and sank. That ship is gone.
You just imagine him like in a fireplace with like a glass of whiskey, like thinking about the old days and like lamenting like potential decisions. Like, I mean, it just evokes so many things in me. Kind of like, well, I mean, back to the All Too Well, like the imagery of the red scarf, like having that be Taylor's rosebud, like there is such evocative imagery in every facet of Taylor's life. Also, in talking about petty, sir, I think there was a moment you were petty in this book when you were talking about the Kim and Kanye, and you said Kim Kardashian, author of the book Dollhouse.
Look, I have a bit of that too. I just love the idea that this is. I mean, honestly, the weirdest that these are two celebrities who should be fighting each other when they have absolutely nothing in common. They have no fan base in common. It's not like they're in the same business. But yes, I absolutely love Kim Kardashian, author of the novel Dollhouse. Legend of reality TV, absolute. I guess she deserves credit for never having made a pop record, but It's that
Well,
kind of
she did have one song that Kanye produced way before they got together, which like came and went, thankfully. But I mean, thank God we never got an album, and she's, doing the Skims thing. But it is interesting. It almost like I was like, oh God, please have Taylor protect the rights to her image so Ryan Murphy never does a feud Kim Kardashian versus Taylor Swift.
What a nightmare that would be. Oh my God,
It-
that would be a total nightmare.
I don't mean to put that out into the universe, by the way. I just wanted to throw that out there. I was wondering for you, is there a Rob Sheffield Taylor Swift 2025 interview coming? And at this point, what would you want to ask her or talk to her about? You've done this for a living and you've done so many great things. What would you want to talk to Miss Swift about at this moment?
There are so many mysteries. One of the mysteries is that for someone who used to treat interviews as an art form, they were a very crucial part of her artistic statement. She loved interviews. She loved like talking to them. She took outrageous pains in interviews to give each interviewer something totally different. Taylor was never somebody who was going to go into canned material. Even if she was talking to 400 reporters a day about her new album, she was going to try to give everybody their own individual quote, something that most people probably wouldn't even notice. But for her to do that so devotedly for years and then totally slam the door shut. She doesn't do interviews anymore. We don't know if she stopped liking them or whether she's just biding her time for more interviews. That's what I hope. I certainly would love to interview her in 2025.
Yeah.
For her to start telling her story in interviews again, I think would be amazing. Since, I mean, she did that interview around this time last year when she was Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And boy, was that a fun interview. That was definitely the kind of interview that she does, knowing that she's not going to get asked any actual questions and that she can say literally anything she wants. And she's not going to get asked for clarification. Nothing she says is going to get questioned or challenged. It's almost like she was bored in the interview and wanted to see if she could get a rise. Like, hey, look, I'm Gandalf right now. I'm collecting Horcruxes. To me, this is a movie. Like she's making all these like hilariously over the top rock star statements, and she knows like nobody's going to interrupt and say, "Wait a minute, what the hell is a Horcrux?
Yeah.
Why are you Gandalf? Why did you bring Gandalf into this? What are you talking about, Taylor Swift?" Nobody's going to say that.
But I love that you caught that. And you also said in the book, you said David Bowie had to spend the 70s gobbling Bolivia through his face before he started talking this way. And I was like, that's such a beautiful example of like, yes, I mean, Bowie at that time. And I was like, just thinking about like, yeah, you're dead on right. Like she can say anything and we can like, then that adds to the mystery and we can like take this apart, but there will be no follow-up questions, no pushback. And that's why I'm campaigning for the Rob Sheffield Taylor Swift 2025 interview. I'm actively going to campaign for this.
That would be my dream. I mean, it's amazing that she is somebody who's out there in the public eye 24/7. And you would think that keeping secrets would be very, 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 very difficult for her. And yet she's obviously quite good at it because she's always planting these little things that are hidden in plain sight that nobody notices until years go by and they turn out to be part of a song or foreshadowing for a song that she's planning years in advance. And it's absolutely sick that she does this. And it's evil that she does this. And I love it. A great example. So my favorite song on Midnights, I realize this is a minority choice. I realize it's a controversial choice. My favorite song on Midnights is one that nobody else likes, which is Labyrinth. It's not just the least streamed song on that album. It's one of her 10 least streamed songs ever. It's just a song that I'm clearly just wrong about. I'm on the wrong side of history with Labyrinth. I accept that. I'm just wrong about it. Who cares? I love it anyway. I got to be true to myself. And that great line in that song where she sings, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And 6 months before that album comes out, she quotes that line in her NYU commencement speech when she's the commencement speaker at New York University and she's wearing the cap and gown. And part of her speech, great speech, by the way, is breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And nobody noticed it at the time. And then it shows up in a song 6 months later. And it's like, what is going on in that brain of hers? Who else would do something like this? Expending so much effort in tiny little details like that. And yet she lives for that.
And in that commencement speech, didn't she also say, I think you have this at the beginning of your book, she said, become friends with cringe or something
Yes.
like that?
Learn to live alongside cringe. I
I love
absolutely
that.
love that.
I
Yes.
love because my whole life I feel like, I've been made to feel like the things that I love are cringe. And I think, you have to get to your 40s to start realizing like embrace the cringe. It's okay. It's good. It's amazing to be in the cringe. Like there's so many of us here, all the cool people or the anti-cool people, we're cringe and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think Taylor, she's considered popular now, which is also another great part of your book, is this legend of Taylor saying that she wasn't popular in high school. People made fun of her. And then there is like, maybe proof that she actually was popular in high school. I like that things we can dissect and argue about, and also how Taylor perceived her own life as opposed to how we perceive Taylor's life.
Absolutely. There's so much about her that is thinking long term in terms of telling this story. And you could even see that in her songs, in the way that an image will recur from song to song. She will have a song with, for instance, the word pirates in it. There's two songs where Taylor sings about little kids playing pirates. And one of them is The Best Day in 2008. And that's a song about her mom. It's a song about her loving family, two little kids playing pirates. It's because they're in a happy home, because they're playing together happily. Perfect family kind of image. And then years later, 12 years later, on Folklore, there's another song called Seven about a very different kind of childhood memory. And there's two little kids playing pirates who want to run away and be pirates together. That's because one of them is growing up in a very unhappy house with a very different kind of family, a very miserable childhood. And Taylor is too little to really understand just how miserable her friend's childhood is and how deeply this will affect her friend for the rest of her life. And it's amazing because that tiny little image, just the little pirates, which is just thrown into the song, it's just thrown in once, but it connects those two stories in such a fascinating way, an invisible string connecting these two stories. And something I love is you can love both of these songs without needing to notice that detail. You can love those songs for years without picking up on that detail, but it's there to provide this additional light on this song if you're listening with that kind of level of attention. And if you hear the pirates and make the connection between those two stories and how different those two childhood scenes are, it tells you something different about both characters, both songs, both stories. And that's just the kind of thing she loves to do. It's absolutely bonkers.
That's why you can keep going back to her catalog and discovering new things. And also that's what's great about music in general, is that with our life experience, we can hear a song 10 years later and it can move you way more than it did 10 years earlier because you've lived a life. I always think about her as like the Daniel Day-Lewis of pop songs, because she can put herself into characters that aren't necessarily her. She can access other people's emotions, other people's lives that aren't hers. And I think sometimes people will think, oh, she's writing about her own personal life. And she does, of course, but she's also gifted enough where she writes about characters. These are characters as well. And I think that's just another arsenal in her tool belt.
Absolutely. God, your Daniel Day-Lewis comparison is genius. That is.
Oh my God. Good. Rob Sheffield said something I said was, I'm going to put Rob, you gave me a moment of the year here.
That is so perfect. And it's really true that, that all these different, she's not creating one character who shows up in story after story. She's creating all these different characters that you wouldn't recognize. Remember, like when Daniel Day-Lewis was like coming up and you're like, wait a minute, like this guy is also that guy?
That guy? Yeah.
The heartthrob and the unbearable lightness of being. He's also like the punk rocker in My Beautiful Laundrette.
Or My Left Foot. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And he's the jerk in Room with a View. It's like all these different Daniel Day-Lewises with no attempt to create a through line. I always think of, when I think of cinematic analogies to Taylor Swift, I think of one of my favorite movies, along with 20th Century Women, another one of my favorite filmmakers, Richard Linklater, and one of my favorite of his films, Boyhood.
Yeah.
And the way he made that movie, like the two main characters, the two parents, Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, and they filmed the movie over all those years, over 20 years. Every year they would film another scene of the movie, and it's built over that time. So you see the two actors aging in real time. You see the little kids in the movie growing up to be adults what an insane long-term gamble it was to even begin a movie like that, and that it turned out to be as great and as powerful as it is. But I think of that as very much like Taylor Swift's songbook. It's very much each album, each era is a moment in the life, and it doesn't define the life. It doesn't end the story. Her life story is a sequence of those moments. And just like Boyhood, we see her going through time in real time in so many ways, and in ways that mirror our own stories.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead on. I was thinking, you have now a catalog of books to pull from, and do you still get nervous leading up to the launch of a book? And I think this one in particular, because there is such an impassioned fan base. What are your feelings leading up to this release? And do you? I mean, I listen, I can say 100%. You did her justice, you did the fandom justice, but do you have any nerves personally?
Well, when you're putting a book out into the world, there's always an element of mirrorball, right? Like there's always a standing on my tallest tiptoes, you always feel like you're out on that tightrope, out on that trapeze, that sort of vertigo she describes so beautifully in that song. Look, I feel like the character in Mirrorball a lot. I feel like that character every day. Sometimes I'm the character in Mirrorball, really wishing I were the character in New Romantics. I'm often the character in The Archer, who is just glad she's not the character in the Mirrorball. I relate to all these characters every day, but Mirrorball is definitely one that comes out when you're putting a book out, and there really is that sense of, standing on my tallest tiptoes and hope hope this is doing it. But it's not so much nerves or fear or anxiety, but it's just that sort of excitement about, until people start reading the book, it doesn't really exist yet. It's not even. The great Harry Styles, he told me something once about songwriting and about how exciting it was for him to release an album and for him to put out a song and have people hear it. And he said something beautiful. He said, until people hear them, they're not even songs. They're just voice memos. And that's really
I love that.
Perfect. I love that too. And it's true. You can write the greatest song in the world, but until people hear it, you don't for sure know what it is. The song doesn't know what it is. It doesn't really exist yet as a song until it comes in contact with that audience. And with books, it's very much the same way. It's like whatever you think a book might be, you find out more like as it goes into the world. And it's always a surprise. That experience is always so full of surprises.
And folks, just bringing up Harry Styles, he does talk about Haylor. He does talk about Harry Styles and Taylor. And I love how you even reference Joni Mitchell and James Taylor in regards to Haylor and Harry Styles and Taylor Swift. I thought that was a fascinating part of the book. You guys, I learned so much, even though I consider myself up on things. There are so many little details that I can't wait to reread and then go back and actually play the songs that I was reading about while I read it again, because I'm that kind of geek. I also want to talk about, you talk about in the book and certain of your other books, you were I think was it Folklore that you that you released on cassette, and you said the kathunk of the cassette worked perfectly on Folklore, or was it Midnight?
Yes, it comes right after This Is Me Trying. Here's the cassette right here, which happens to be on my desk. This is the kind of geek I am. I have my Taylor cassettes right next to my Walkman.
Amazing.
So I've got all these different Taylor tapes, from Midnights to Folklore to Evermore. Anything she puts out on cassette, I love to hear it on cassette. Going back to Reputation, I actually burnt that album onto a CD, put it in my CD player, taped it onto a tape so I could listen to it in my Walkman, just because that to me is a very private and personal way to listen to music on cassette. And Evermore, I love how at the end of side one, it's This Is Me Trying, and you get that really painful ending with, at least I'm trying, and the organ, and then it fades out, and there's a moment of silence, and then which is how it sounds when the side of a tape ends. Perfect ending to side one of Folklore on cassette, and I refuse to believe she didn't plan it that way.
See, that's the thing with Taylor. You almost think she had to have known. And I will say, reading that, I haven't thought about really cassettes in a long time. And, that romantic thing of having your Walkman and hearing that thunk, like, I mean, that just evoked so a visceral image in me. And now I was like, do I need to go out and get a Walkman? Do I need to start listening to things on cassettes again? I just have like about 10 more minutes with you, and thank you for all of this time so far. But I was wondering if there was a time, like, if this Taylor conversation ever happens, like, what, or even just a casual conversation, what would you want to turn Taylor onto right now that you think she might not know about? Like, what music, like, have you heard this? Have you heard that?
That's one conversational mode I wouldn't go into with her, because I have to assume she's heard everything, she's read everything, and she's never going to give that away. I would never presume in a million years to say, you should listen to this because you might not know it yet. I have to assume she knows everything, dude. Like, because she does. And the fact, something I love, when she was putting out Midnights and she released this statement, like, so meet me at midnight. We'll wander in the dark and maybe we'll even find like the ghost of ourselves. And it's this really beautiful statement. And somebody on social media, Emily Dickinson Stan account, like, noted that this is from one of Emily Dickinson's letters. This is a quote from a letter written by Emily Dickinson in the 1850s. And it's not even a famous quote from Emily Dickinson. It's super obscure. It's something that even an Emerson scholar wouldn't necessarily know. But this actually, I looked it up, and yes, she did indeed quote that line. It comes from this letter that Emily Dickinson wrote in the 1850s. And then it turns out, couple of years later, that Taylor and Emily Dickinson are supposedly sixth cousins. And the fact that she is that level of geek for not even Emily Dickinson's poetry, like, she's reading her letters and stealing little lines and thinking, I'm going to park this right here and see if anyone notices. Stuff like that is like absolutely sick, evil, should be against the law, hopefully will be against the law. There's absolutely no excuse for it. She is just a cruel and unusual geek who is a manipulator of geeks like me, geeks like you, geeks like most of us. And she is able to play those games like no other artist has ever had so much fun making so much sadistic
and
stuff like that.
Thank God somebody is out there playing these games. Thank God, because it just makes it so much more exciting. It makes it like, it gives it substance, not just the lyric, like everything, the releases, the concerts, all of this. Also, before I let you go, I just wanted to say, there is a beautiful part of your book when you talk about your mom. And my mom passed away about a year and a half ago. And one of the last things, and I'm sorry for yours. And I understand. I always think the Eras to me is a grief tour, because I tried to take my mom to an Eras tour that somebody had given us tickets to in Florida, and she just couldn't, her body couldn't do it, like her at the time. And, it was one of those things that I just was wanting her to see, like, cause she knew I was a fan. And I thought, oh, if I could share that with her, that would be so amazing. And to you, what is the album that you considered a grief album that I thought was fascinating?
Lover, for me, it's the same thing. It's like When It Happened. What a beautiful story about wanting to take your mom to the Eras tour at the end, and that you ended up going to.
Yeah, after she passed, I got to go. I mean, we wanted to go because of that, and it was beautiful,
That's a beautiful tribute. I love that. She was absolutely right there rocking with you. For me, Lover, it came out the summer of 2019, and that's when things suddenly started to go really
weird.
bad. And so I spent so much time like taking the train to see her in the hospital or in the recovery home, and listening to Lover on my way and listening to Lover on the way back. And even though these are a wide range of songs with a whole lot of moods, a whole lot of musical styles, I love that album just turned into a grief soundtrack for me. So even like the really goofy, jolly songs like London Boy, which is, talk about a glitter gel pen song. That is like an absolute upbeat goof. And yet that is a song I really, really bonded with, like while I was like entering this grief experience. And you just can't predict how music is going to work in a grief experience. Sometimes something that seems like it should be, for instance, the song on that album that I should have bonded with was Soon You'll Get Better, which is about, fear of that kind of bereavement of maternal loss. And that was the one that I barely listened to. I was like, yeah, I'm so not in the mood for this song right now. Maybe when I get a spare life. And it's a thing where like the songs on the album that worked about stuff like that at all, those were the ones that really carried me through the experience, and
Yeah.
that's part of how the weirdness of her music is how it operates on emotional levels that you just can't predict.
Yeah, you had this great line. My grief felt so stupid to me. I knew this loss was coming my entire life, so why was I so unprepared? And I thought that was so dead on about how I felt about this experience, and how a lot of us feel. And I think you really speak to a lot of us when you write things like that. It's kind of like Taylor Swift's music to me. Some of your writing, just means something so personal to me. So thank you. As we wrap up here, Paine, you think in the book, which is Taylor's publicist, and you say, Paine write about Depeche Mode. What was Paine write about regarding Depeche Mode? I'm a Depeche Mode fan, so I was just curious if you're able to share that.
She's always right about Depeche Mode. She's a hardcore Depeche Mode fan. And so, no surprise, because like you can hear elements of that like in Taylor, like it's funny because like I'm a serious Depeche Mode geek, so I can go deep on like something like 1989 is very much, even songs like New Romantics, very much a speak and spell sort of musical statement. They're very like Vince Clarke sounding, whereas an album like Reputation is such a Martin Gore album. That song is so much her black, that album is so much her black celebration. And like something you listen to something like, Stripped from Black Celebration, and it totally would fit on Reputation, like right next to something like Dress or I Did Something Bad. So that connection goes deep.
I was wondering if obviously Paine has to be aware of this book. Do you think Taylor is aware of this book, or do you think she'll read this book? And do you think Travis Kelce will read this book just to get a little bit of inside information? Because as you point out, it's almost like he has been, kind of auditioning for the role of Taylor Swift's boyfriend and doing it so successfully, which we didn't even get into any of the romantic stuff, which is totally fine because it's all about the work. But do you think, I think 100% she's aware of this book and will read this book. Do you even think thoughts like that?
I don't think thoughts like that. She's definitely aware of it. Like, she's definitely aware of it. And it's a thing, honestly, if I were her, I wouldn't read books about myself. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
However,
she's her.
Yes. Who can predict what goes into that mind? So that's something where I just like, I don't open that door in my mind at all. Cause like, she is just the most unpredictable of brains.
But my God, if she does read it, I think, if she does read it, I think she's going to absolutely love it. And then I know you said you're wrong every time, but let's be wrong one more time. Where do you think Taylor is going to go next? Where do you think she goes next? Because we ended the U.S. run of the Eras Tour, and she's going to end it for good, supposedly in Canada. We have the election coming up this week, which she did make a post about. And there's, a lot of you even talk about the elections past in regards to Taylor. But where does she go next musically and with her life, if you were dare to guess?
Well, if I had to guess, if I were a betting man, and if I were, I would be speaking to you from, debtor's prison. I'd be a pauper. It's a very good. I'm not a gambling man. That's glad that's not one of my vices, especially if I were betting on Taylor Swift. Forget it. But there is an element of punk rock in her that I see is ready to explode right now. So this would be number one on my wish list, and it would be my hunch if I had one. But have you ever seen? There's a great clip on the internet where she's doing "We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together" with a punk band, and she's doing a full-on screamo version, and it's just that song, and there's so much aggro in that song and so much swagger in that song, and it's so perfect for that kind of approach. And then she's just doing a total like head-banging punk rock version of that pop hit, and it sounds so perfect. And I'm like, no way could she make that sound only once and not want to do it again, not want to do it for an entire album. I think she's going to go all the way with a punk rock album. It's going to be metal as hell.
Well, she's going to be the girl with the most cake.
She absolutely will be.
Yeah. Man, this has been just such, I've been looking forward to this forever. Rob Sheffield, not only this book, which I'm going to put the link to, and I'm going to make you guys go out and get it because it's the perfect holiday gift. It is a perfect gift for yourself to treat yourself, but also to your friends. I've ordered 2 copies for 2 of my best friends who love Taylor Swift, and I can't wait for them to get it and read it so we can talk about it over the holidays. I'm telling you, you are going to need this book. Rob Sheffield, thank you for all of your work. This has just been truly one of the best parts of the year for me talking to you, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. What a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much. Love this podcast and a real honor to be on it. Real honor to talk to you.
I hope to talk to you again, man.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.